Mars in the 7th house. Many of you will be watching this video because you have Mars in the 7th house, or you think you have Mars in the 7th house. And therefore, many of you are sort of maybe worried whether or not it's a good thing or a bad thing. And you might even want to judge my video based on whether or not I say it's a good thing or a bad thing. If possible, suspend that concern until we get to the part about reading charts. First, just don't worry about the fact that you have it and just learn what it is. Okay? So in order to know what it is, there's two parts to the puzzle. There's Mars and there's the 7th house. So we should understand each one individually, and then it will be much easier to combine them together. So this is the 7th house. It literally is the area of sky that's immediately around the western horizon. So that is why it symbolizes everything it symbolizes, because the western horizon is where the sun sets. And sunset represents disappearance, and sunset represents other people, because the sun or the self is declining. From this information, we can make sense of the fact that the 7th house is called the house of endings, destinations, and death. It is a place of the dispersion and disappearance and the movement of things, or travel. It has to do with other people, so this is the most famous thing about the 7th house, is that it has to do with partnerships, especially marriage. But any kind of intercourse, even sex, but also cooperation, like exchanging things, trading things, and doing commerce. That's the basic structure of the 7th house. Now, do the same thing for Mars, and then you'll be ready to interpret Mars in the 7th house. So Mars represents masculinity, and masculinity has two aspects: independence and inception. So Mars represents individuality, independence, freedom, and that's why it also represents self-reliance, which is the capacity to be independent, and that's why it represents strength, which is what you need to be self-reliant, to be independent. And that's why it represents the things that make us strong. So obviously one of the things is muscle, but other things also make you strong, like weapons, or tools, or machines, or any kind of technology. Because Mars is independent and strong, however, it gets into conflict with other people who are independent. So Mars represents conflict, contest, competition, competitiveness, competitors, and struggles. Now, masculinity is not just independent, it's also inceptive. This is why Mars has a lot of initiative. It represents initiative. It represents ambition, motivation. Therefore, it's full of passion, lust, and hunger, the driving forces that motivate us to do stuff. That's why it represents bravery, courage, and confidence, because that is the ability to take the risk, to take the first step towards what you want. And Mars signifies the ability to make those decisions and take command. And command and decision making is actually an outcome of confidence, not necessarily learning or education or knowledge. So Mars represents the confidence to make decisions, take command, and be in a dominant position. That's everything we need to know about Mars. We already know what we need to know about the 7th house. To understand Mars in the 7th house, now just put the two side by side and see where they're on the same page or where they are antithetical to each other. For example, Mars is all about individuality, but the 7th house is all about partnership, so they're antithetical. Mars is all about passion. Passion is something that makes you move, motivation. And the 7th house is about travel, which is what happens when you're motivated. So here, they're actually on the same page, because Mars is the motivator of action and 7 is the destination of action. And the third example is that Mars is very dominant and commanding, and the 7th house is about exchange. So exchange means transference of things between peers, but Mars is very dominant in its nature. It's not peer oriented, it competes with peers. So here they're antithetical again. Now what we have here are 3 seeds. Some of the seeds look like they'll probably make a more tasty fruit than others. So you might be starting to get your worry again about whether or not Mars in the 7th is good or bad, or if it means you're a good person or a bad person. But still hold on to that, because we want to see these seeds sprout. And in order to know how they sprout, we need to know what soil they're growing in. To know the soil truly, we must know the whole chart. Okay? But before we go and look at some specific instances of charts with Mars in the 7th house, let's just sprout the seed a little bit on its own and see what kind of initial sprouts come out. So Mars is all about individuality, and the 7th house is all about partnership. So what sprouts from that? Here's a person that is not like their group. In fact, they may not like their groups, so they may be, or they probably are, rebellious. And another way of looking at that is maybe they're difficult to get along with, or they have difficulty getting along with others, so you could call that antisocial. The other seed is that Mars is passionate, and the 7th house is emotional. So this seed sprouts into an ambitious person, a person who likes to move a lot, a person who always has motivation to do something. So they're not prone to settle down. Rather, they always pursue something. And the third seed of Mars in the 7th house is that Mars is very dominant, but the 7th house is very exchangey or peer-oriented. So this sprouts into the idea of a person who's quite dominant in the sense of not necessarily being very tactful or respectful. Let's see some people now. As I said, we want to see how these sprouts fare in different types of soils or different types of charts. So let's bring in some actual people with confirmed birth times, with tropical zodiac signs in a whole sign house system. Malcolm X and John Lennon. Very good example of all of these qualities, but especially of being rebellious. Einstein, Fermi, and Steven Spielberg. Good examples of all of them, maybe particularly of always pursuing something, always having a new project, always having a new thing that they have to do and accomplish. Another three people, Charles Bukowski, Jeffrey Dahmer, and Ramchandra. Again, they exemplify many or all of these traits, but probably especially the dominance. Now, how about Ramchandra? His dominance is quite positive in that he was one of the world's history's most famous kings. He's kind of like the example for a king and what a king should do and be like. So why is he there right next to Jeffrey Dahmer, who's dominant and not respectful and not tactful? Ram was quite tactful, quite respectful, but dominant. Why don't we take a look at that soil of that chart? And why don't we also look at Einstein, because Einstein is a genius. So does Mars in the 7th house. Actually, maybe we should say somehow that it makes you a genius. Let's take a look at Einstein first. The reason why Einstein is a genius, or what indicates Einstein being as a genius, is not that he has Mars in the 7th house, but rather, first of all, that his first lord moon is in Sagittarius. That's the beginning. Second thing is that his 5th lord is Mars. And his 7th house is Capricorn. So Mars in Capricorn is exalted, so it means his 5th lord, lord of intelligence, is exalted. And furthermore, it's in Neech Bhang Raj Yoga, by virtue of its house exchange with the debilitated Saturn, who is the owner of Capricorn. Finally, the planet of intellect, Mercury, is conjoined to that very extreme Raja Yoga. So that is the soil that shows an intelligent person. Mars in the 7th house gives Einstein other things and gives him his rebelliousness, difficultness to get along with his antisocialness, and gives him his uniqueness. And how about Ramchandra? He's not disrespectful at all. Well, he does have some questionable attitude towards marriage. And that is what Mars in the 7th house tends to indicate, right? Because it's individuality clashing with partnership. But for Ramchandra, almost all of these traits take place in a soil or a context which is extremely moral. So look, his first lord Moon is domicile with the 9th lord Jupiter, who is exalted. There you go. That is your major bell ringer for an extremely moral person. In that context, you have Mars in the 7th house. But there's more. His 4th lord, Venus, is exalted in his 9th house, house of morality. Furthermore, his Mars in the 7th house is also exalted like Einstein's, and it's aspected by the 9th lord, exalted Jupiter. So hopefully you see how important it is to know the whole context of your chart before you go into that difficult realm of asking yourself what things about me are positive and I should accentuate and what things about me are negative and I should try to downplay. If you want to actually have my interpretations for all of your placements in your chart, you can go to my website and order that from the charts page. It's victorcara.com/R2. Thank you so much.